went to parties a lot and if I had a girlfriend. I told him I didn't, and then he asked me if I've ever had a boyfriend while putting his hand on my shoulder. I immediately started walking away with the cart, but he followed me. I told him I wasn't into whatever he was thinking about. I went faster and faster until I finally made it to the back storage room. He didn't follow me in. I wasn't supposed to stay back there for extended periods of time to avoid customer theft. I decided it would be best to just wait for him by the register so that he would ring his stuff up and leave. But I waited there for at least 20 minutes. He never came. I decided he was gone, and whether he stole the eggs and something else, there wasn't anything I could do now. I had to go to the bathroom, so I took a quick jog to the back of the store and into the employee bathroom. Moments after sitting on the toilet, my heart dropped into my stomach as I heard the bathroom door open. I choked the urge to say something like, "You can't be in here," but I didn't want to give away my position. I lifted my leg so that I wouldn't be visible from under the stall, and what happened next was simply horrifying. I sat there for the longest time, looking at the floor, not moving a muscle. When I finally looked up, I could see an eye peering through the crack of the stall door. I screamed. I knew I was trapped. I knew I had one shot at making a move. I grabbed the box cutter in my pocket and began sliding it through the crack of the door, forcing him to move his eye away. I took that chance to slam the stall door open in his face and hightail it out of the bathroom and all the way out of the store. I called my boss at least 5 times before he finally picked up and explained everything. He told me to call the cops, and so I did. Of course, the man wasn't in the store anymore by the time the cops showed up. I only did the night shift twice after that, and luckily didn't see the man again. I used to work the night shift at a gas station on the side of some highway in the country. From the hours of 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., the road was pretty dead. I would have maybe 1 or 2 people come in to pay cash in the whole night. It was a very boring and depressing job, especially doing the graveyard shift, but I had just finished college and I needed to pay off my loans. The only reason I kept this job was because my boss threw me an extra $5 an hour for doing the night shift. On this one cold December night, I was doing my usual thing, reading the newspaper, playing games on my phone and whatnot, and I noticed the headlights of a car pulling off the highway into the parking lot. It was a red pickup truck. Somebody stepped out and shut the door. I went back to reading the paper as I saw that he was standing by the gas pump. I assumed he wasn't paying cash. I looked up a few moments later and saw that he was still standing in the same position, staring at the gas pump. I almost felt obligated to go out and help him. He was obviously confused. I felt a cold chill run up my spine as I saw the 6-foot-something tall man slowly turn his head to face me. I couldn't make out any features of his face. I knew he was staring at me. I tried to pretend I didn't notice by going back to reading the paper. Of course, I wasn't really reading now, and I was a bit shaken by the guy out there. I just wanted him to pay debit or credit and leave. I looked up and gasped as the man was now much closer to the front door of the building. It wouldn't have been so disturbing if it weren't for the fact that he wasn't moving. He was just standing still, as before, still looking in my direction. I walked over to the door to get a closer look. All I could see in his face was still blackness. I locked the door and flipped the open sign to closed on the door. I didn't care if this would possibly get me in trouble. I was not taking a chance because, quite frankly, I was scared shitless. I walked back behind the counter and sat down on one of the containers on the floor just so I couldn't see the man outside anymore. I stayed in that position for a good 5 minutes, texting every friend I have to see who was awake. I was desperate to tell somebody about this. When I finally got up to check that he was gone, I let out a full scream as the man was now right outside the door. I picked up the phone on the counter and called the police. The operator was reluctant to send somebody over because of the way I described the situation, but I persuaded them. I hid behind the counter, balled up like a child. I began to hear heavy thumps at the door, not innocent knocks to catch my attention. I mean thuds and thumps, trying to break down the door, and then eventually it finally stopped. I heard the sound of a car starting outside and then driving off. I looked outside and he was gone. A patrol cop along with a state trooper pulled into the parking lot. I reported the red pickup truck and told them which direction I thought he went in. I couldn't describe his face as all I saw was blackness. Of course, there wasn't much the police could do as the man didn't really do anything. I left that job a few months later to a job in the city. It was 2 years ago. I was called in to do the night shift, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. at 7-Eleven, since somebody called out. The store was located on a busy road in a rather quiet and rural area. During the night shift, you could expect anywhere from 10 to 20 people coming to buy a beer or something else. This one particular night, there was this one guy, mid-20s, that came in. He started making weird noises, like loud yelling noises. I assumed he had some kind of mental disability. In fact, my brother has a mental disability, so I immediately felt sympathy for the guy. He walked up to the counter without any items, with his head facing me, but his eyes were looking up at the ceiling. I felt uncomfortable. I honestly didn't know how to deal with it. I tried speaking with him, but he only responded in loud noises. I kept checking if he was with someone outside, but he was alone. There weren't any cars in the parking lot, so I assumed he walked. He stood there for so long, looking up at the ceiling and making noises, that I tried to get him out by handing him a bag of chips and telling him he can go. I tried finding some kind of number to call for someone to help him. Then, out of nowhere, he finally turned around and walked out of the store. I felt so horrible for the man, but at the same time, I felt a bit creeped out. About an hour later, the phone on the counter rang. I picked up to hear the familiar yelling sounds of the man from earlier. It caught me off guard. I didn't know what to think, other than this has to be some kind of prank. I hung up on them and was now becoming paranoid of my surroundings, constantly checking the outside through the windows. Come 4 o'clock, the person working after me came in, finally allowing for me to go home. It wasn't my problem anymore. I got home and threw all my stuff on the table, ready to get to sleep. But my phone rang within a minute after entering the door. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would someone be calling at 4 a.m.? I could only imagine it was bad news. I braced myself and picked up the phone to hear the man again. I felt sick to my stomach as I listened to the loud noises he made. I struggled to slam the phone to the receiver. All night, I felt like I was being watched, even with all the blinds shut. And I could swear I heard strange noises coming from all over my house. I refused to get any sleep until the sun came up. Weeks passed and I had forgotten about the incident, until one day, I'm going into the basement for the first time in a while. I found that papers had been scattered all over the floor, and when I went into the basement closet, I found writing on the walls. 7-Eleven had been written in Sharpie on the wall, along with the address to the 7-Eleven I worked at and my house address. The most disturbing part, I also found various kitchen knives, along with a large pocket knife sitting in the closet. It started out as seemingly just an innocent person, turning into something of a prank, ultimately turned into something much more horrifying. He had been living down there for God knows how long, and I'm just grateful that, for whatever reason, he changed his mind and left, because I haven't seen or heard from him since. All I can say is that man is dangerously ill. I've worked in the K-9 unit for 9 years, and I've worked my fair share of graveyard shifts. I've definitely come across weird things at night, but I'll never forget this one night. I worked with my dog Sammy, a German Shepherd. She was 2 years old at the time and was still kind of new to the job, just like me. I was driving down the road surrounded by crops when I spotted a suspicious-looking white van parked inside the crops. Both doors were open. I flashed my lights to try and draw out whoever was there. Nobody came out, so I parked and scanned the place out quickly. Nobody was in sight, so I took Sammy with me to track down the driver of the van. Sammy started going crazy when we reached the trunk of the van. She was pulling so hard she almost broke off the leash. I opened the trunk to the van, and a blast of foul air hit me in the face. I almost passed out from the mix of the horrible smell and the pure shock of what I saw in the trunk. I counted 7 full body bags, each with a pair of feet sticking out at the bottom. I requested immediate backup with my radio. I heard the sound of a twig snapping nearby, and Sammy just lost it. I lost grip of the leash, and she took off into the crops. I pulled out my gun and followed the sounds of her barking. As each and every crop hit me in the face, I felt as if something would reach out and grab me. I stopped when I could no longer hear Sammy's barking. As I stopped, the sounds of movement did not. I realized I heard movement in all directions. I had never experienced such fear in my life. I stood still as the movement around me stopped. And then, out of nowhere, I felt 2 arms wrap around my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't fight. I was going to die. And then, I heard the sound of Sammy's bark, followed by the scream of the man choking me as Sammy bit down on his leg. The next thing I did was something that I still question if it was appropriate doing to this day. I turned around and pulled the trigger, killing the man. I grabbed Sammy by the leash and ran all the way back to the car. I could tell people were following us from behind. I managed to make it to the car safely and drive a quarter mile down the road. I didn't stop to see which way they went. I didn't hold my ground. I fled like a coward. I cared much more about our lives than I did this job, and I'll still say that today. But it still pains me knowing how much of a coward I was. Backup arrived shortly, but the van was gone. I even failed to get the plate number on dashcam video, or even just writing it down. This was within my first few months on the force, but it made me feel like absolute shit for months to come. I, someone who's sworn to protect, let a van full of killers get away.
You've got mail.
Number 5. Sandy McNulty, age 27, had just recently gone through a divorce. Within the same month, she signed up for Match.com, and a few days later, received a strange email. The email addressed Sandy by her full name, with a long paragraph explaining that the sender knew of her recent breakup and thought that they would make a great couple. The sender asked for Sandy to get back to him about what she thought. The email was signed anonymously, but there was also a file attached to it. It was a large picture of a man's genitalia. She assumed it was her ex at first, but the picture did not resemble him, and when confronted, he was sincere in telling her that it wasn't him. Plus, she told that he wasn't the type to do anything like this. Sandy continued to receive emails from the anonymous sender, with each one getting more angry and aggressive. She did the best she could of ignoring it, until attached to one of the emails was a picture of the side of her house taken at night. She blocked the sender's email finally, and that was the last she ever heard from any of this. It's still unknown whether it was the ex sending the emails or not. Number 4. A former Reddit user at one point posted a story of a scary email he received. He had one day received a text message from an unknown number telling him to check his email as soon as possible. He obliged and found a message in all capitals titled, "Download this now." It was a short message addressed to the user with his full name, address, phone number, and all. There were 5 files attached, 4 of them pictures, and one an exe file titled, "Download this now." Each one of the pictures were very personal to the user. The first one a picture of his house, the second a picture of a very young woman who he eventually recognized to be his mom, the third a picture of him as a baby, and the fourth a random picture of a creepy looking middle-aged man. The user didn't open the exe file, he instead reported the email to the police. It's unknown what the exe file was. The Reddit post was taken down within the same month. Number 3. Father David of a small New York town church had an email address dedicated to his church. He received a strange email with no title, and upon opening it, his computer crashed and he got a blue screen. He'd have trouble restarting it until finally successfully logging on to have all his files and data gone, and his screen wallpaper was a large and shockingly disturbing and realistic image of Satan. Internet Explorer, along with other important programs, would not open, and occasionally a distorted laughing sound effect would play in the background. It's unknown how this was accomplished, but it was most likely just a very cruel prank by a hacker with a little too much time on his hands. Number 2. In the year 2009, a huge wave of emails filled with viruses was spreading across the internet. The email titles were innocent enough. For example, some of them were titled free 40% off coupon to Target. However, once opened, a virus would be forcibly installed into the user's computer without their knowledge. These viruses were known to allow all activity on the user's computer to be monitored, sometimes even giving partial or full control over the computers, and sometimes even enabling the built-in webcams to the computers, secretly spying on the users as they used their computers without them ever even knowing. Nobody could seem to figure out how this was accomplished or how to prevent it, but luckily, the swarm of emails eventually died down on its own. Similar swarms of emails have since occurred on a few occasions, but not as dangerous. Number 1. The girl in this story is very sensitive about this and refuses to give her real name. So, for the purpose of this story, she'll be referred to as Jen. Jen was attending freshman year in high school. She was a very pretty girl and got the attention of a lot of guys, both young and, fortunately, much older as well. She received an email from the dean explaining that her grades could be improved and he would like to talk to her about it at some point. Strangely, he left a note at the bottom of the email informing Jen not to respond to the email. A week passed and Jen received another email from the dean. This time, he asked her to meet him at the back of the school at 7 a.m. before classes started. Jen walked to school and went around back this one day and could see somebody poking their head out from behind one of the dumpsters. Not the dean. She ran all the way home and the parents reported this to the school. It turned out the dean of the school didn't send the messages at all. The email was traced back to a website that allows you to send fake anonymous emails, and the computer used to send it was the computer in the furthest corner of the local library. There was this time long ago that I was in charge of watching my cousin and his 4 friends while they slept over. My uncle was paying me $100 to watch them for the night. All I did was play video games with a bunch of 10-year-olds for most of the night. I thought it would be the easiest $100 I ever made, but things took a huge turn for the worse, and I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. We were in the basement still playing video games. 2 of the kids also heard the sounds. I counted 5 kids sitting on the couches, and neither my aunt or uncle were supposed to be home that night. I swallowed my gum when I realized the basement door was wide open. I told them to stay there while I ran upstairs to shut the door. The door didn't have a lock from the inside, only the outside. I called to the kids to hide in the workout room. I shut the TV and all the lights and then followed the kids into the workout room. We listened in the dark as the footsteps approached the basement door, and then the horrible sound of the basement door opening, followed by heavy steps stomping down each stair, one by one. One of my cousin's friends were crying. I had to tell them to shut the hell up. I leaned against the door, with a chair along with a bunch of barbell weights wedged against it. I listened as the door to the boiler room was opened, and a few moments later, closed. Screams of children filled the room as the doorknob to the workout room began to turn. I pushed the door with all my might to keep it shut. Whoever was on the other side quickly gave up as we heard rushed footsteps going up the stairs. I heard the footsteps right above our heads moving in the direction of the front door. This was before everybody had cell phones, so calling somebody first wasn't an option. I scanned the whole house, finding that the front door had been left open and all the bedrooms upstairs had been trashed. Nobody was in the house, so I called the kids up. A few things had been stolen, but as long as nobody was hurt, we were all happy. It was during a blizzard in Valley Stream. I was getting paid $250 to watch some couple's kid while they went away for the weekend. His name was Matthew. This took place on the first night, which was a Friday night. Matthew was already supposedly asleep, while I was in the living room watching a movie. I got a knock at the door. I looked at the clock. It was close to midnight. There was no way I was opening. Not even 10 seconds later, I heard the sound of 2 or 3 men angrily banging on the door, telling me to open up. I felt like my heart was about to stop. I took a peek through the blinds, and there was somebody standing right on the other side of the window. I fell back in fear, and after managing to get back on my feet, I ran to the kitchen phone first thing to call the police. They said because of the weather, it could take a while for an officer to get here. I was told to take the child and hide somewhere until an officer arrived. They wanted to keep me on my line. I wasn't thinking clearly in the heat of the moment and hung up. However, it wasn't until I ran through the living room that I realized the banging had stopped. I took a second peek through the living room window. Nobody was there now. I heard the sound of glass shattering from the few rooms over. My knees started to feel weak as I realized they had just broken the window and were about to climb into the house. I had to run and get Matthew. I couldn't just leave without him. Of course, when I got upstairs, there was no time left to run back downstairs, as I already heard footsteps and laughter coming from downstairs. I covered Matthew's mouth with my hand as I ran with him into his toy closet. A few minutes dragged on to what felt like half an hour as we sat there in the dark closet. Matthew began to squeal as footsteps on the carpet reached the outside of his bedroom door. There was more than one person that came outside. There weren't many places to hide in this room. I was actually reflecting on my whole life, just how sure I was going to die. We heard the sound of a police siren outside, even from in the closet, and then I heard one of the men in the room mutter, "Oh shit." I opened the door back up as I heard at least 3 pairs of footsteps hurriedly rushing down the stairs. They didn't get far, as the police later found their footprints in the backyard, leading to our shed. There were 5 men in total, and they were all arrested. I was 15 years old, still babysitting since I couldn't get a real job. This was by far the most horrifying experience of my life. Me and this kid I was babysitting, his name was Mike, were taking a walk with his dog through the woods in his backyard. His dog stopped, ears pointed up straight, paw in the air. The dog started barking, pulling, and going crazy. I noticed something. We were nervous that it was a black bear, so I told Mike to turn around and walk back to the house. I struggled to pull the dog in another direction, and then I noticed what he was barking at. Behind a big tree was some guy just standing there, staring up at me. I yelled out, asking to him if he needed something. And with that, he turned around and walked off. I was genuinely freaked the fuck out. The dog calmed down at this point, so walking back was easier for a few minutes, until yet again, the dog started freaking out about something behind us. I couldn't see what it was, but I was worried it was the same guy as before, and that he might have been following me. I was tempted to unleash the dog on this guy, but that seemed like a bad idea. I didn't look back for the rest of the way back to the house, but the dog continued to bark and pull. I did the best I could to run, or at least walk fast. I made sure for a good half hour that we weren't followed to the house, checking every window and door routinely. I thought it was safe to eventually play Mario Kart with Mike and forget about what happened. But my worst fear came true, and right outside the window in the patio, I heard the sound of one of the toy buckets falling over. Turning on the patio light, I could see that a green bucket full of huge toys and balls had been knocked over. There was no way some small animal could do that. The dog was once again going crazy, barking at something. I told Mike to get me his dad's hunting rifle. Maybe that was dumb to have an 8-year-old get a gun for me, but I didn't have time to think rationally. There continued to be strange noises coming from all around the outside of the house. There were some taps on the windows, chimes being pushed, things falling over, but I eventually caught a glimpse of him through one of the windows. He was walking past until he noticed me and stopped. I lifted the gun up to show him that we were armed. He didn't run away right away though. He stood there crouched like some kind of creature, staring right into my soul. He finally walked back into the woods. I didn't sleep much that night, jumping at every small cracking noise. A week later, I got a call from Mike's parents. They told me a creepy-looking man had been stalking the house through the woods. They asked me to describe what the man that I saw looked like again. I couldn't give a good description because I didn't see much of his face, but I assured them it was the same man. They practically begged me to babysit on a few occasions after this, but I always respectfully declined. That was a while ago. I have no idea what's become of this family today, and what's become of the man stalking their house.
Knowing what I know of this place, we should probably leave. As long as
I would frequently babysit back between the ages of 15 and 18. I lived close to a relatively wealthy area where people were more generous in terms of pay. There was never a shortage of need for babysitters either, so I made a decent amount of money. I've definitely had to take care of some stranger kids, but this one takes the prize. Right from the moment I met Michael, he seemed really quiet and weird. He was 12 years old too, which some might argue is more than old enough to be home alone, but maybe not overnight. They needed me to stay overnight. His parents told me he could be a bit strange sometimes and may need some extra attention. I didn't really need to do much though. In the room that I would be sleeping in was a huge toy closet, big enough to fit a big Lego play table with a bunch of Legos and other toys sitting on top of it. Michael was up there for most of his time building with Legos and other toys. I didn't really spy on him too much, I just let him do his own thing. But I heard him constantly talking in there, as if someone were with him, not play talking. I could only assume he had some kind of problems, and that's what his parents were hinting at. He came down eventually to eat some of the leftovers in the fridge, but then went right back up to his closet. It wasn't until I finally told him it was time to go to sleep that he left the closet. I just wanted to go to sleep myself. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to sounds coming from the closet. Sounds of toys, like Legos. I called out to Michael to go to sleep. The sound stopped. The light wasn't on in the closet, so I was confused as to how the hell he could be playing in the dark. I went over to open the closet and turn the light on. Michael didn't seem to be in there. I dismissed the noises. I wasn't a paranoid person. I fell back asleep. I'd say an hour later, I woke up to partial brightness in my room. The closet light was on, but the door was shut. I called Michael's name again. I was pissed now. I saw the outlines of feet at the bottom of the closet door, and then heard a little giggle as if Michael were messing with me. I knew he was in there now. I marched over and threw open the door, and literally fell back in horror when nobody at all was in there. Where the two outlines of feet were, there was nothing now. I felt a pain in my chest from the fear. I ran to Michael's room to find him asleep in his bed. I locked his door and laid down on his floor. Just being next to another person made me feel a little safer. I fell asleep on the floor, and when the parents returned the next day, I decided to keep quiet about what I witnessed. I say what I witnessed because I know what happened. I got paid and left, and never had to worry about it again. Of course, it still sends chills up my spine thinking about it. I still have no idea what to believe. best friend for a reason. They will sacrifice themselves if it means saving the ones they love. Here are 3 horrifying stories that would have turned out tragic had a dog not been around. Number 3. I had to watch after my sister when my parents were out one night. I wouldn't be out anyway though. I was busy playing the current hit game that had just come out at the time. My dog Sheriff was laying next to me, and he lifted his head up, and his ears twitched. You know, that thing that dogs do when they hear something. I paused the game to see if I could hear what he was listening for. I didn't hear anything, and lost interest, assuming it was someone walking their dog outside or something. Sheriff jumped off the bed and ran out the half-open door to the bedroom. He was barking, going crazy at something. I didn't care to follow him, I simply yelled at him to shut up. But eventually, his normal annoying barking suddenly turned crazed and defensive, as if he were confronting something, or someone. That's when I got suspicious and ran to go see what it was. I heard a sheriff's nail scrape the basement steps as he flew down the stairs. My heart sank as I realized he must have been chasing something. I found myself standing at the top of the basement steps for a whole minute, staring into the darkness below, gathering up the courage to go down there. I finally did, turning the light on the way down. Sheriff was standing by the door to the laundry room. I didn't even dream of opening that door. I trusted in him enough to believe that someone was in there. I struggled, but eventually picked him up and ran with him all the way back upstairs. As I was about to shut the light, I heard the sound of the laundry room door creaking open. At that instant, I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. I listened for a few moments with my ear against the door, and I could hear, barely over the sound of Sheriff barking, the sound of his steps squeaking. I dove for the phone and called the police. When they arrived, they caught him trying to bust out through the basement window. Me and my sister watched as the officers walked him out to the car, and I'll never forget the dreadful stare the man gave me as he was forced into the back seat of the police car. But I'll also never forget how grateful I was to have Sheriff with me that night. Number 2. I used to have a Beagle Pointer mix before she passed away at the age of 11. Her name was Mandy, and she was the sweetest and most loyal dog a person could ask for. She would never harm a fly, but she did have a big troublemaking mouth. So the story goes, I was 15 years old, getting ready for sleep one night like any other night. Mandy slept in my room, and when I walked into my room, finally ready to crash in bed, I was greeted to Mandy growling. She wasn't looking at anything in particular. I playfully asked her what was wrong, and she just made an annoyed doggy sound before putting her head down. I found it funny. For the good hour of me rolling around trying to fall asleep, Mandy would constantly break the silence with growling. I would peek at her, but she would still have her head down. She showed no reaction to me offering to take her out, so I could check that off the list. It quickly went from cute and funny to just annoying, but I eventually fell asleep. I woke up to see that it was 2 a.m. and Mandy was growling. I tried to adjust my eyes in the dark, and I could eventually see Mandy standing in the middle of the room. She was looking up at my closet door. I felt my heart begin to race. What I was witnessing was flat out disturbing. I turned on the lamp and watched as Mandy continued to stare up at the elevated closet. I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided to open up the closet and check what she was barking at. I want to note right now I have one of those closets that lead to an attic. When I checked, there was nothing in the closet, but I noticed the attic door was cracked open. You can imagine the fear in my body as I ran to my parents' room to get my dad. He didn't seem to take me too seriously until he got to my room and saw Mandy growling and looking up in my closet. My dad is a big guy, so he went in there without a weapon. I sat there, worried for what was to come next. What came next was my dad screaming at the top of his lungs at somebody. I heard boxes fall over and glass shatter as my dad moaned in apparent pain. Somebody was rushing out of the closet. I hoped it was my dad, but instead, some 6'5" man with a hammer in his hand jumped out from the closet and passed me. What happened next still surprises everyone. Mandy jumped up and grabbed a hold of the man's arm with her teeth. The scream of the unfamiliar voice filled the room. My dad came rushing out of the closet just in time to jump onto the intruder, taking him down. He sent my mom to fetch my little brother's prop handcuffs. My dad held him down while I handcuffed him. Thankfully, he was sent to jail. I don't know what his intentions were, and obviously if he had a hammer with him, he probably wasn't just planning on robbing us. If he didn't have Mandy at that time, I could only imagine what would have happened to our family. Number 1. I was only 11 years old, and my brother was only 8. We were walking our dog Buster around the block in the dark. Buster was a husky German Shepherd mix. Upon turning the corner to the other side of the block, we ran into a tall man who greeted us with a smile. He stopped in his tracks and seemed to expect us to as well. It seemed he was trying to start a conversation, but we just kept walking past. My brother kept looking back, telling me that the man was following us. He was right. Each time I turned around, the man was the same distance from us, but he would stop looking whenever we looked. I motioned to my brother to walk faster. The faster we started to walk, it seemed the closer he got to us. We were approaching our house, but my heart stopped when I heard the muffled scream of my brother as he was grabbed and pulled away. Buster started barking like a rabid dog, and I shit you not, pulled the leash out of my hands and sunk his teeth into the man's leg. I could see the blood dripping down his leg as his screams caught the attention of the people inside their houses. Our neighbor came outside, and we explained everything while pointing at the man. The man began hopping away. I had to put the leash back on Buster to keep him from chasing him. My neighbor called the cops. She was a tiny little woman. She couldn't do anything to that guy even if she tried. She then walked to our door and told our parents what happened. Police came to question us and the neighbor. They caught the man limping down a sidewalk a few blocks over shortly after. One of the cops told us our dog was a hero, but we already knew that. This happened when I was 15 years old. My best friend Anthony wanted me to come over for the night, since his parents would be gone all weekend. I rode my bike over and put it in his backyard before letting myself in through his back door. We played basically every video game he had, from FIFA all the way to Call of Duty, with popcorn and other junk food spilled out all over the floor. As the night progressed, we moved from video games to watching half a movie and getting bored, to doing prank calls at close to 10 o'clock. Anthony made a few calls to different pizza places. When it was my turn, I just dialed a few random numbers in hopes to get someone at their house. On, say, my 4th attempt, I finally reached somebody. A guy with a deep and rough voice picked up, answering with a yeah instead of a hello. Anthony's laughing in the background made me stumble with my words mid-sentence, ultimately cracking up into laughter. I had never done a prank call, so I sucked at it. The guy on the other end was silent. I regained a straight face and tried to continue with the call. It went something like this.
Sir, would it be alright if I borrowed one of the wheels from your car? What's your name, kid? My name is Bob. Really? You sure it's not Anthony?
It hit me like a brick. I looked up at Anthony, whose face was noticeably full of fear. I hung up the phone, not wanting to be on the line with whoever that was for another second. Anthony, who the hell was that? I asked him. I don't know, he told me. Does your caller ID info display your name or something? No, it shows my dad's name. We hopped on the computer and did some research, trying to figure out how it was possible to get someone's name through their phone number. It didn't make sense how he could get Anthony's name so quickly. He was way too young at the time to be on any of those personal information sharing websites. We ended up asking a question on Yahoo Answers, since no one had a similar experience. The question turned up no answers. I suggested he call his dad, but he said he wasn't supposed to have anybody over for the weekend, so he didn't want to call. We planned on sleeping in the living room, so we just resumed watching the movie that we hadn't finished from earlier. Right after the phone call had left my mind, Me and Anthony looked at each other when we heard his front storm door opening, and then the doorknob to the front door began to turn. It only was able to turn about halfway before the lock was stripped of it. Anthony turned off the TV, and I went over to the window to see who it was. I spread the blinds open. There was a tall guy standing outside. He noticed the blinds moving and turned to look at me. I practically threw the blinds back into place. Me and Anthony hid in the kitchen, listening for any more noises. We heard the sound of the gate to the backyard opening, as it was right outside the kitchen window. "God damn it," I said. "I forgot to shut the back door." Anthony urged me to run and shut it. I made it to the hallway leading to his back door and froze. There was a silhouette standing outside the back door. I don't think he noticed me, but he was surely looking into the house. He opened the door and stepped inside. I tiptoed to the kitchen and motioned for Anthony to follow me upstairs. We made it to his room as quietly as possible, pulling the door shut to avoid making any noise. We crawled under his bed. He had cloth covering the bottom of his bed, so you couldn't see anything under it unless you actually moved the cloth. The doors downstairs all opened, each one getting closer to the stairs. Thumps finally began up the stairs, and he was right outside the door now. The door to the room opened. I could hear Anthony's breathing. It was too loud. Footsteps moved over to the closet, and then the closet opened. I could hear the coat hangers being slid around as the fabric of the jackets and coats rubbed against each other. Footsteps moved over to the bed and stopped. I felt like my heart was about to explode out of my chest. Anthony's breathing was too loud. I had to cover his mouth with my hand. Nothing but silence in the room now. He laid still for so long, I almost thought he wasn't even in the room anymore. I moved my hand away from Anthony's mouth and whispered in his ear, "Do you think we can make a run for it?" He was about to answer when the most disturbing, memory-haunting scream I'd ever heard filled my ears as Anthony was seemingly dragged out from under the bed. I crawled out and saw him struggling with the man. I desperately looked around for anything to use as a weapon. I settled with the screwdriver sitting on his nightstand. I hurried over to the man and drove the screwdriver into his back. He let go of Anthony as he let out a scream of agony, giving us time to get the hell out of the house. Running onto the road would give away our position too easily. It would take too long to make it to his neighbor's house. We dove for the tree line in the woods and took cover behind a bush, watching the house. The back door opened as the man stepped outside, looking around the backyard. He then looked out to the woods. I felt his eyes pass me as he scanned through the tree line. It seemed that it was too dark for him to see us. Then, he turned his head back in our direction. I ducked behind the bush. "Joe, he's coming." "What?" "Dude, get up, we gotta run." He was right. The man was approaching us fast. How could he have seen us? We ran through the woods with the leaves crunching under us, giving away our position. When Anthony tripped over something, I crouched down with him, hoping we had run far enough. Not even 20 seconds later, oncoming footsteps from the direction we were running from came fast. They slowed down only 2 trees away from us, as we lay face down in the leaves. Moments later, the footsteps take off in another direction. We waited until we could no longer hear them, and took off back in the direction of the house. While running, over the sound of leaves crushing and my heavy breathing, I could swear I heard leaves crushing from behind us. We made it back to his backyard, into his house, and this time remembering to shut the back door. We were now able to call the police. Anthony stayed on the line with them, while I patrolled the back windows, making sure nobody was out there. It was so dark though, I couldn't see anything. So I did something that seems stupid today. I turned on his backyard lights, and immediately in the distance, over by the woods, I saw him, standing in front of a big tree. He turned off back into the woods and disappeared out of sight. That was the last time me or Anthony ever saw him. I would be lying if I told you we heard the occasional knocks at our windows or something cliche, No, that was it. 5 years have passed and nothing has happened. Do I wonder if it was somehow linked to the prank call? Maybe. Does it make sense? Not really. But yeah, this was the story of how me and my still best friend Anthony almost died during a break-in. Me and my wife have had our fair share of arguments, but there was this one night that she wouldn't stop bitching over the stupidest shit. It got to the point where I forgot to put the toilet seat down, and she lectured me at the top of her lungs with an ear-piercing voice that I just couldn't take it anymore. I called my buddy Paul up, and he told me I could crash there for the night. I was exhausted, and I didn't need to deal with my crazy wife at the time. Paul had a huge house, which was another thing my wife always yelled at me about, how all my friends have nicer houses than us. We had a few beers and had a bro chat. He suggested I stay there for as long as I needed, but I assured him I'd only stay for one night. I did.
Out of juice? One-day delivery. It's on Prime.
Working as a pizza delivery boy, you'll run into a lot of strange things. However, this story may be an excessive example of that. I was 21 years old, and it was a late Friday night shift at John's Pizza, meaning I would be closing with my boss. It was about 9 o'clock, an hour before closing. My next delivery was to the Saugerties, the next town over. The drive wasn't too long, maybe 15 minutes. I was a bit confused. The map was taking me to an isolated road that seemed to lead to nothing. I drove down it anyway, and shortly realized it led to a house by the water. It seemed every light in the house was on. Upon getting closer, I could hear music blasting from inside the house, even with my windows shut. Strangely, there were only 2 cars parked in front of the house, at least from what I could tell. It was a pretty wide open property. The front of the house faced the water, so the road, or driveway I suppose, curved around to the front by the water. As I walked up to the front door, I took more notice to the fact that the house was brand new. I then rang the bell a few times since the music was so loud. I was caught completely off guard when 2 women opened the door, one blonde and one brunette, barely clothed. They had huge, flirty grins on their faces. The blonde woman grabbed the pizza, while the brunette handed me a 20. I was about to ask where everyone was, but the brunette called me cute and asked me for my number. I thought I was about to get extremely lucky. After giving her my number, I was about to attempt at getting myself invited in, but the blonde immediately did that for me anyway. I entered the house and picked up on a rather unpleasant odor almost immediately, and there were literally no people anywhere. I didn't care that much. The 2 women began to lead me upstairs, but unfortunately, the story did not go in the direction you may have hoped it would. I was literally on the 2nd step when a horrifying scream for help came from upstairs. I looked up there, and then at the 2 women. They were looking at each other. The blonde one very clearly mouthed the word shit to the brunette. I didn't even really piece everything together at that moment, but I still just kind of instinctively knew to run. I must have looked back like 20 times before I was able to turn around the car and drive back down the long driveway. Looking back through the mirror, I shit you not, at each and every one of the windows in the house, there were heads peering out to me as I drove away. Of course, I called the police on my way back to work and told them to check the place out. They did, and some investigator guy called me back not even an hour later, telling me whoever was there abandoned the place, and that in fact it was a brand new, just built vacant house for sale. It didn't surprise me much. There was no party going on there. That same night I got a text saying, "You know where you were." That was enough to drive me to quit that job. Since I mentioned the possible victim upstairs to the police, they came to my house to ask a series of questions about the people. I have also had my number changed since then, as I want no possible links to this incident, and I want to live with peace of mind. so it was my last delivery of the night at Domino's Pizza to a house that was about 10 minutes away from the shop. There was a note on the door, which I read after ringing the bell. It said, "To Pizza Guy, please let yourself in and leave the pizza in the upstairs bedroom. Money will be on the bed." Immediately, red flags were springing up in my head all over. I actually called my boss and told him I didn't feel safe going in there, and he actually told me it would be best to just go inside. I tried to use my charm, as people say I have, to persuade my boss, but he was hell-bent on me not bringing back that pizza. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in. It was an average-sized house with some furniture that seemed a bit aged. There was a small nightlight shaped like a candle on the wall, providing just enough light to see a bit into the living room and my way upstairs. There were no lights in any of the rooms up there, just another candle nightlight. More red flags going off in my head. I come to the end of the small hallway upstairs. There are two doors, one open, one shut. The open door leads into a dark room, which I had to guess was the bedroom. As you may imagine, I was shaking in my shoes, afraid for any sudden sounds or movements anywhere. I pushed the door open completely and pressed my hand against the wall looking for the light switch. Found it. I flicked it on. Nothing. The lights didn't seem to work in this room. I very slowly walked over to the center of the room until something cushiony stopped my leg. There was a bed. I placed the pizza on the bed and began to search for the money in the dark. Just then, I heard the faintest, quietest thing come from outside of the room. I lifted my head and then resumed searching even faster. I was hoping to God it was just some kind of old person living here and they were too sick or nervous or whatever to meet someone. I found the money. It felt like 2 bills. I hope they were 10s. I put them in my pocket and left the room. I stopped outside the room and saw the door to the other room was open. I could have sworn it was shut earlier. Your pizza's on the bed. Have a great day. I myself could hear the shake in my voice. There was no kind of response. I started to lean into the dark room to maybe get a better view. Too dark. I reached my hand into the room and searched for a light switch, but something grabbed my arm with a painfully tight grip and tried pulling me into the room. I screamed and jabbed at the arm with my keys, finally breaking free and getting back to my car. Nothing chased me out, and nobody followed my car. I told my boss about it, and even talked him into giving me a raise for making me go through that hell. He didn't want me to call the cops for whatever reason. It wasn't really on the top of my mind, but in hindsight, I guess it would have made sense to get the police to check that place out. Anyway, not everything was terrible. I did get my pay raised from $7.50 to $8.50.
What I do is too important to entertain the idea of failure.
I was never the delivery boy when I worked at Gino's Pizzeria, but when the new kid called out sick on like his second day, I had to take over for the night. It was a slow Tuesday night for deliveries, so it wasn't too bad. I had a manual 1998 Ford Mustang, a gas guzzler, so I in no way wanted to beat that car around town delivering pizzas. I made 3 normal deliveries within 3 hours. The place closes at 9 on weekdays, so I estimated 1 or maybe 2 more deliveries for the night. I picked up the phone to a customer who sounded like the definition of a meth head or something. She had a raspy voice, she stuttered, she forgot what she was saying, she had long pauses. Literally, there was like a 10-second gap between her saying, "Can I just get a and regular pizza?" It was a huge production just getting the address from her. It sounded like she was asking someone in the background what the address was. Well, I was just so excited to meet these people. After she gave me the address, she hung up without me even telling her the price or how long. I told my chef, whose name was actually Mario, I know, a bit cliche, 1 regular pie. 10 minutes later, I was on my way. We live in the middle of absolute nowhere, so each delivery was a longer trip with a bigger tip. It took probably 10 minutes for me to get to the location. There was a long and dark gravel road through the woods and occasional trailer homes I had to drive through until I finally reached their home. It was a trailer home. The lights were off inside, but I could see the orange glow of a fire coming from out back, and I could hear a woman yelling at someone. When I shut the passenger side door after grabbing a pizza, I noticed the curtains to one of the windows move. Somebody was just watching me. I didn't know if I should knock on their door or go around back. It sounded like there was more than one person back there, so I decided to just go around back. I greeted them, and they spun around faster than a bullet. They were disgusting. They looked like typical trailer trash meth heads. The woman looked at, I'm guessing her husband, and asked what he's doing here. He then scolded her, saying she was the one who gave the address. They seemed to be standing close together to hide something behind them, and quite frankly, I didn't want to see what it was. I asked them if I should go around front, and then they whispered something to each other. The woman pointed at me and told me to wait there. She would go get the money. She went inside, and for the next 2 minutes, I awkwardly stood there trying not to stare at the scary-looking guy, who I knew was staring at me the whole time. Finally, the woman emerged from the house and went back next to the man. She handed the man some money and asked him to count it. She whispered something after that. I was getting very nervous now. I felt as if they were going to try and rob me or something. I wasn't stupid. The man started counting the money very slow. I mean, really slow, like 5, 10. I kept my eyes on the woman. She was looking into the woods behind me. And then she nodded her head, staring off behind me, and saw some huge guy approaching me with an axe in his hand. I flung the pizza box at him to try and slow him down, and somehow it worked. Or maybe he just didn't chase me. I got home safely. I didn't even go back to work that night. When Mario the chef texted me, I told him what happened, and all he said was, "Holy shit." That was it. I'm happy that was the only night I had to deliver. So if you live in the suburbs or city, sure, be a pizza boy. But if you live in the middle of nowhere, maybe try the supermarket instead. I'm
Shell Rotella with advanced synthetic technology protects against engine wear